Good morning, Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. Something that was on my mind a little bit is something I want to talk about black people being so butthurt when someone claims their West African ancestry and doesn't want to claim being Native American. Why do you get so butthurt and upset? Because I'm proud of my heritage and my ancestors and where they come from. What does that have to do with you? Maybe you need to look at yourself and stop worried about what I'm proud of. Maybe it's an internal conflict with you and not me. Because I'm proud of my indigenous West African and Central South African ancestors that I'm currently learning about and excited to learn about, and currently saving to take a trip to visit them as well, and reading books about them. Because a lot of things that I learned in this life personally within myself, it is within my family particularly. I can't speak for everybody else, but I see like black people have a lot of internal hate amongst themselves and a lot of jealousy and trying to put others down and discourage each other because they're coming from a mindset that wasn't even meant for them in the first place, a perspective that wasn't meant for them in the first place, which gives them low self-esteem and identity issues. So me, I'm standing strong and proud in my heritage of my West African indigenous ancestors. I don't need to dominate another group or, like a lot of like voices on these social media platforms always want to come with a perspective that they need to be on top in everything of everybody else and it's some type of competition. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to educate people that feel lost or are interested in learning about the West African indigenous systems. So, that being said, like I said earlier, some really have an issue when a black person in the United States claims their indigenous West African ancestors. Why do you get so defensive and upset when someone claims that they're from West Africa? What is the problem with that? Why be so upset with claiming your West African ancestry? Because I'm not upset and hurt about it. I'm actually accepting it and moving forward. So maybe, as you walk these journeys and everything. Hi, Haley. How are you? Good morning if you're in the United States. When you walk these journeys, it's a very lonely walk when you're discovering, what your ancestors believed in and the customs, the systems, and everything else. But you also have to understand that your ancestors were not perfect. They made mistakes. They're human like anybody else. And they had traditional systems. They had traditional dress, like how they wore their clothings or their art, their languages, their marriage systems that they had. I guess that's what I would use the word marriage or coupling. But I just don't understand why some black people feel the need to push on me that, oh, you're actually not West African. Ancestry is not West African, but you're Native American. When I'm sitting there telling you that I'm not a Native American, maybe you're a Native American, but I'm not. I'm proud of my West African indigenous ancestors, okay? So that just is something that I wanted to speak on. I'm going to start coming on here and talking about um some I guess like African proverbs from the West African perspective or Southwest African perspective, proverbs to recite and chant to yourself when you wake up in the morning so that you can be proud of your ancestors and the culture that you come from. Because you can't, when you walk into this world, I mean, when you walk these journeys and everything of rediscovering who your ancestors were and everything, you also have to learn how they spoke and what their proverbs and the the wordings that they used, or what's the phrases that they had for life when you go through different experiences. And one thing that I learned, and I've been learning about a lot of male figures because they seem to be a lot more popular than woman figures, but there's woman figures that I'm learning about too, like Queen Nandi, which is like, she was a Southern African, which she was from the Zulu ethnic group. But like Africa has like 3,000 plus ethnicities. So I think it was a proverb that I learned from Shaka Zulu. I don't have a proverb from Queen Nandi yet. But Shaka Zulu said something about when a lion strikes. I have to find that proverb and read it to you guys. I forget. I'm still learning, so bear with me. But like I'm really am excited to learn and rediscover, how they worded things and chant and speak those things when you actually when you wake up in the morning, because it builds up your sense of self, your sense of identity, because some black people in the United States specifically have identity issues, and some of them think, just because this country, which only came into existence technically, what was it, in the 1800s? It's only been a country for about 200 plus years, but the colonial history is 400 plus years. So my ancestors are way older than 400 years, period. My ancestors are older than 400 years. There's no way that I'm going to let a blip of like wars and enslavement try to tell me like who my ancestors were and everything, like for 400 years, when that's not the truth. Like, like go back further than that. So that's just like a scar in their history, but they're way, they go way back before that, bro. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say, "Oh, yeah, my ancestors, all they had was they were slaves and that's it for us and everything." Like, oh my goodness. Like, that's the only history I have. Like, oh, that's not the only history that I have. My ancestors go way back before slavery. So, and I'm going to be proud of that too. I don't need to I don't need to be looking at myself through the lens of the American systems or the American education systems. I don't need to look at myself to have a standard from the perspective of the culture, the dominant culture here, in a sense. I'm not going to demonize myself or my ancestors anymore. I'm not going to reject my ancestors anymore. These are things that you want to say to yourself when you wake up in the morning, when you want to be proud of your indigenous West African ancestors, period. So you can start off waking up in the morning saying, I am proud of my culture. I am proud of the history that my ancestors and the customs that they had believed in. I am also proud of my skin tone. I'm proud of the accomplishments that my ancestors have made before slavery and during slavery and after slavery. And I'm proud of the things to come. But I'm also going to say that my ancestors are not perfect. They make errors and they make mistakes like any other human being. And I'm not going to reject my ancestors. I'm not going to reject my ancestors. This is what you want to say. I'm not going to reject my ancestors. I'm not going to reject them anymore because the spirit and the mind and soul is strong. You know, you have an intuition, you have an instinct that tells you things, or a vibe, people have all these different terms for things, but some of us are interested in learning about our roots. There was a call to do that. And when you have that call, you need to listen because it's informing you that you need to teach others and consult others possibly. Um, you know, let me see. Where do I want to start with this? So, like I said, I'm learning from the Zulu perspective, which is the Southern African perspective. Now, when I learn from the West African perspective, I'll probably look at like Igbo, like um, the Igbo language and the Zulu language, which are two interesting languages to learn. They're very hard to learn, but I learned how to say good morning in Igbo, which is Ututu Oma, and good afternoon in Igbo, which is Ehi Ehi Oma. So I'm only talking about myself and I'm not talking about anyone else and how they feel about themselves or being ashamed of their ancestors they deem because they have some type of insecurity because they lost a war and they had to go into slavery, that they're so ashamed of being a loser and can't accept defeat. But if that's the case, then if you're so mad and you want revenge, why don't you just take revenge? Why don't you just declare war on your counterparts here in the United States? Like some of you are so upset and so vengeful. You want some type of revenge, but you can't make peace with who you are first. You got to make peace with who your ancestors were first. You know? I learned also when I'm still somewhat Christian, but I'm not really like a heavily practicing Christianity. I'm kind of like on the fence right now. But I learned in Christianity, it can be like when I used to pray when in my younger years, it really seemed like Christianity was like a bloodthirsty like religion in a sense. Like it made me like hate other people for no reason, you know? Like other than just because of the things that I read in this book. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to have that mindset anymore. I want to be more like open-minded and inform myself and read about how my ancestors actually approached other human beings. So this is just my morning narrative to you guys. I'm grateful for everybody that tuned in and listened to my thoughts here. I hope that you guys have a great morning, a safe morning, a healthy morning. And as always, Ashe.